Alright guys, welcome back to Rampant Lion Reviews then. So for this one we are doing another out and about video here in Aberdeen. I've been wanting to film up here for quite a little while, as I said in the last one. But for this second one we are going to check out the Fierce Bar on Exchequer Row. So we'll do as we always do, we'll go in, we'll have a little look around, we'll do some beer tastings and yeah, we'll have a good time. So hope you guys enjoy this one. Let's get started. Alright guys, so yeah, just to let you see where we are. So this is the outside of the bar here. As you can see, we're pretty much right next to the View Cinema. And there you can see just, the castle gate and stuff up there. So it is pretty much, just right behind the town centre. But let's go out and have a little, let's go in and have a little look around the bar and we'll do our usual. But yeah, as you can see, door here. So on the right there you've got the mental hophead thing, which is the symbol of Fierce beer. As you come in, here you are. So yeah, stone brewing. You can see a little bit of Fierce, some of the artwork off the cans and things. But yeah, this is quite a nice bar, I have to say. It's just quite chilled and relaxed and stuff like this. So yeah, you can see some fridges of beer. We'll have a look at that in a second, and then round here. So yeah, we'll find a place to sit down. We'll have some beers and we'll do our thing. Let's do it. Alright guys, so a little look at the tap list then. So I'm in here on the 28th of October, if I remember rightly, if I remember the date. Yeah, 28th of October 2021. And yeah, they've got a nice list here. So you can see the Fierce Pilsner, which I've had before, the Hazy IPA, the regular IPA, rhubarb, the Cranachan Killer, which is a raspberry pale. I've had that before. People like buns, cinnamon bun ale. I'm not quite sure I fancy that. The Moose Moose chocolate stout, Cafe Racer, which is one of their classics. We'll need to do a taste of that. Have a Break, a chocolate wafer pale ale. The Beepa Black IPA, which has just been released through the Aldi Beer Festival. There's a few things from Overtone in here now. So they've got Check Yourself Pilsner, the Citra Mosaic Spice Jam, Chuffed, which is a double IPA, Cherry Berry Magic, Overtone Pure Magic, Maple Nutter, and then they've got one from Beak Brewery as well. Those guys are really highly rated. But yeah, number 19, the Heavy on the Bourbon. I think that's maybe one that I need to try later as well. And they've also got a sour double IPA Strata from Vault City. So this should be pretty cool. But as you can see, 20 different taps. This is pretty impressive. Alright guys, well let's get started then. Our first tasting here at Fierce Bar on Exchequer Row in Aberdeen. So, first one we're going for is the Fierce Pilsner, and this is a beer that I've had a few times and I know it's a good one. I just thought this was a nice way to kind of kick off, if you like. So this one comes in at 4.2% ABV, very straight shooting lager beer. As you can see, it's poured nice kind of bright straw golden colour. Had about a half finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head on it when it was poured. This is a 1/3 pint, by the way, and I have to say I do like these teku glasses that they brought the beers in. I've not really reviewed beers out of these too often other than in the out and about videos, but I have to say I do quite like the Fierce ones. But yeah, it certainly looks the part of a Pilsner. Let's have a closer look at the aroma then and see how we go. But like I said, I do remember being quite impressed by this beer. I did quite enjoy this when I had it before. Yeah, it smells very, very nice. So straight away with this one, you get that lovely kind of Pilsner crisp lager malt base in there. Soft white, soft fluffy white bread, a little bit of a kind of bread crusty note in there, and you do get a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity thing on the nose as well, which is great. So I really like that. On top of that, yeah, you get a little bit of sweetness out of this the more you smell of it, but it does have that kind of soft, fluffy, but still slightly crisp, white bready sort of thing there. I'm not sure if this will use German or Czech lager malt from the aroma, but I think it could maybe use like an English lager malt or something, because it doesn't smell, the malt base smells very, very nice, but not sort of authentically Czech or German in that sense, I would say, but it does come across really nice. On the hoppy side of things, it's what you'd expect. You do get a little bit of earthiness out of it. I'm pretty sure it's using Czech or German hops in there. I think it might be using a bit of Czech Sats and a little bit of like German Hallertau or Tettnanger, because you get a smooth earthiness in this one, you get a little bit of a herbal quality, and you can smell quite a bright floral aromaticity, but there's also a nice kind of little zesty, grassy sort of thing going on as well. So yeah, some really nice kind of hoppy aromas out of this. The fruity side of the beer is what you'd expect. You've got that sort of sultana kind of thing, the dried white green grapey notes, a little bit of gooseberry maybe, some pears and apples and stuff like this. And yeah, I think it goes about its business really well on the hoppy side of things. The more that I smell of this beer as well, the more I get a little bit of a kind of yeasty quality coming out of it. So yeah, I do like how this one pieces itself together. So yeah, in terms of aroma, the Fierce Pilsner impresses. Let's have a taste of it then and see how we go. 4.2% Pilsner. Let's do it. Yeah, that's pretty damn solid actually, just as I remember it. So yeah, with this one you can feel middle of your palate, you get a little bit of that bread crusty quality going right across the middle of your tongue. It does actually get a little bit more sort of grainy and things the further into it that you go. So yeah, a bit of that going on. One or two little woody undertones to it for sure. But yeah, it's a lot more, you get a lot more kind of bread crust and kind of grainy character out of it than the aroma would have you believe, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, the more that your palate adjusts to it, you get a bit more of a kind of soft, white, bready character out of it. You do get that in there. Like I say, the malt base in this one doesn't come across as kind of authentically Czech or German, which is a bit different. So I'm pretty sure it's an English lager malt that's in this, or a Scottish malt perhaps, because it does have a wee more grainy character. And you will find at the very back of your palate, you're getting a few more kind of yeasty sort of tones out of it. But yeah, malty wise, I quite like it. It does have the components you expect of a lager. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, there's a little bit of earthiness in there. So you do get that nice little bit of earthiness. As you go further forward, there's a little bit of a herbal quality, and as you push towards the front corners of the palate, a little bit of floral aromaticity, then round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and more sort of grassy. I don't find the green component too spicy or anything like that, but yeah, I think it's got a really nice, it has got a really nice kind of quality to it, this one, on the hoppy side of things. It's what you would expect. On the fruity side of the beer, on the front third of your palate, on the fruity side of things, yeah, it's got a little bit of that kind of peary, appley sort of thing at the front, and then at the back of it you've got that more dried kind of sultana type vibe out of this one, that dried white green grapey sort of thing. So a bit of gooseberry underneath, but then yeah, oily pear and a bit of apple sitting on top of that. Not so much apple, more a kind of peary sort of note with this one. Dried, a little bit of dried apricot in there as well. So yeah, the way this goes together is pretty nice actually. It's kind of, as I remember it, a fairly kind of yeasty and slightly more grainy take on the Pilsner lager. So yeah, definitely cool to try this one again, and I thought, nice to try this as my first one in the Fierce bar as well. I've been here a couple of times now. I think this is my third or fourth time in here in total, but first time filming of course, and yeah, this is a nice way to kick it off. So yeah, Fierce Pilsner, this one, mouthfeel to round off. Top end of light-bodied, smooth carbonation, a bit oily on the mouthfeel. IBUs I think are probably about 15, 20, something like that, probably 20 actually. I think 20 is probably a bit fair. Malt base is quite grainy, like I said, a little bit of sweetness on top. Then you've got that nice little bit of oily kind of fruity character too. But yeah, a nice Pilsner, this one, definitely more yeasty and things than some of the other ones I've had. But yeah, that's your first tasting. Let's see what we've got for the next one then. Catch you in a second. Alright guys, well, tasting number 2 then. So for this one, we are going to go for the Hazy IPA. So this is simply called Hazy IPA. Comes in at 5% ABV, and just going by the little whiff I had of it, it's pretty damn fresh actually. But you wouldn't expect anything else when it's in their bar in their kind of hometown, if you like. So yeah, looks the part, this one. As you can see, lovely, bright, I would say rich kind of dark yellow. This one about a half finger of a frothy, I would say cream coloured head on top of this. You can see the level of haze on this one is pretty impressive actually. For a 5%er, I would say the level of haze on this one is pretty damn good. Now remember, colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil, any adjuncts you put in is going to affect that as well, and any barleys that you do will affect that also, but that's not really going to affect a New England IPA like this one, if you like. But yeah, it certainly looks the part. The level of haze, as we say, is good. That depends on oat, the wheat, and the yeast that they use in these, and it varies from recipe to recipe, brewery to brewery. But in terms of appearances, this is exactly what you would expect from a New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So let's look at the aroma then and see how we go. Oh, that does smell pretty nice actually. So from the aroma, we'll start with the malt as we always do. For me, first impression of this one is that it comes across as quite bready, like quite a bit of barley malt comes out, but I also get a lot of oat in this one. Like I've said to you before, I think there's 6 directions New England IPAs can go in. They can be farmhousey, they can be a bit more kind of rye and grainy leaning, wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, or they can be quite sweet, and quite often you'll get multiple characteristics in each one. And for me, this one is quite oaty and creamy, but also with a bit of a barley malt bready backbone. So yeah, that's what I get on the malty side of things. There is a wee bit of that Werther's Original sort of thing in there, that little bit of butterscotchy, butter candy kind of creaminess and sweetness, so I like that. But other than that, yeah, quite smooth and oaty, barley malt bready, and just a little bit of that Werther's Original note. On the green component, on the hops, I would say that this one is, it's quite, the green component's actually quite, it's not too big, if that makes sense. There's a wee bit of earthiness in it, but that's very minimal. A little bit of herbal quality as well, but again, that's very minimal. You get a wee bit of floral note to it, and the floral notes that you get are a little touch spicy, and then you get a very smooth, grassy component to it. The green component of this beer I don't find that prominent at all, but remember, New England IPAs rely on late addition and dry hopping, which the West Coast IPAs have this as well, but they also have the early addition hopping, so you usually get bigger dank components. But the green component here for me is very smooth and really leaning towards that grassy side of things. On the fruity side of the beer, I get like a soft mango out of this one. Definitely a little bit of soft mango, maybe 1 or 2 little apricot-y notes underneath that, but it's mango, soft but juicy mango that stands out on this one for me. And I do get a wee bit of an oily, tangerine-y, orangey sort of thing, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is something like, you know, one of the more tropical leaning hops, like, you know, Eldorado, Simcoe, Galaxy, you know, something like this. Although I would think it's more likely to be Eldorado or Simcoe because of the softness of it, but the oily, orangey character makes me think maybe Amarillo, because it's got a little bit more zest to it. If it was Mosaic, I think you'd have a wee bit more earthiness in this beer, and you'd also have a little bit of kind of pineapple or whatever, but I find this one really straight up mango and orange, and this is one of their kind of core beers, so that makes sense. If they're going to do this one and produce it on quite a big scale, they're going to use hops that can be, you know, acquired on the big scale, so that would make sense. But yeah, that's your aroma. Let's have a taste of this one then and see. A big juicy oaty in a New England IPA. Let's look at it. Slanger.
In other words, one of the airborne divisions.
Yeah, 80 sessions.
Yeah, 80 airborne.
Yeah. That's pretty solid, it's pretty straight up. Now, I'll say straight away, this isn't the maddest beer you're going to get from Fierce. My experience of Fierce is that they tend to shine when it comes to the big, dark, malty, barrel-aged sort of things. That's what I would say. But this one is pretty damn solid. It's a nice, easy drinker, and I have noticed that with Fierce in recent times, over the last year or so. They've been getting very good when it comes to these more sessionable beers. So exciting times for them. But first impression of this beer is again big, smooth, and oaty. Absolutely. So yeah, this one, middle third of your palate. Wee bit of bread crust in there, but you get quite a dense, thick, white bready character. On top of that, in the middle third of your palate, you can feel the oaty notes there. And again, they're quite thick, and they do dry out a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste. But in the dead centre of your palate, you get a wee bit of that Werther's Original sort of thing, a wee bit of that kind of Werther's Original sweetness. I do pick that up. At the back of the palate, you get a bit of the kind of thicker, taller yeastiness in there. You get a little bit of a wheaty bitiness as well, and there's quite a few things going on in that respect. So yeah, it is a big, dense, smooth, bready and oaty malt base to get this one, but it does get a wee bit drier, and you can feel almost like the kind of dryness of the oats later on. But yeah, it's still pretty solid actually. Let's look at the hoppy side of the beer. Green component is a little bit more prominent than it was in the aroma, but still quite sort of still taking a bit of a back seat. So there is a wee bit of earthiness in this one at the back corners of the palate. It's a wee bit herbal as you come further forward. Then as you push on to the kind of front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more floral and aromatic, definitely. But the earthiness, I think, actually does come out a bit more the further you go into the aftertaste. Around the front curve of the tongue as well, it's got a little bit of a lighter, grassy sort of thing. So you do get that out of it, and I think it leans, the grassiness is a wee bit of zest to it. On the fruity component, I'd say it is what I expected. There's a bit of a soft mango in there, and then on the front half of that front third of your palate, it's a nice oily orange. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is Simcoe. The earthiness is a bit more prominent, so I would be tempted to say Mosaic. I think this is like Simcoe Mosaic, Eldorado Mosaic, or it could be a bit of Amarillo. Difficult to say. Too many hops out there these days. But whatever it is, this one's a fairly solid core New England IPA, and I like it. Mouthfeel wise, I'd say mid-bodied, carbonation is very smooth. It leans towards the creamy end of the New England spectrum. The hoppy bitterness, I think, is a standard 25 or 30. I would say that. The malt base is pretty smooth, and you've also got a nice big kind of oily, juicy, but still quite juicy, fruity character to this one. So yeah, this is solid. Again, enjoyed this. Really enjoyed this. I don't think I've done a few sit-down reviews of New England IPAs, but not this one. Definitely not this one. But I think it has been pretty solid actually. So well done to Fierce on this. Let's leave it at that for the second one, and we'll go on to the third. Catch you guys in just a second. This was the Hazy IPA, 5% ABV. So yeah, this is a really sort of interesting corner of the shop, if you like. So this is where they have their beer fridge. So let's have a little look at what they've got. So you come up to the left side here, Fierce Pilsner, which we've had a little look at, the Fierce Rhubarb, Fierce IPA, Fierce Hazy IPA. Like I said, they've got their core range, and the core range tends to go in the 330s, but you can find 440s of them. Yeah, there's the BPA, the very big Lapjack, Imperial Cafe Racer, very big moose. Classic beers, those two. Late Shift, I think I've reviewed that one, I'm not 100% sure. Citrus Tart, very berry. I wish they'd had that on tap actually. You can see at the back there, Grape Sour. Caramel Mousse, Mousse, Cafe Racer of course, the Cranachan Killer, which is a good one, I'm sure I've had that on tap. So yeah, they've got People Make Buns, which is a cinnamon pale ale, the Chocolate Wafer, they've got the a sour IPA in there as well, which is part of the birthday one, the Hefeweizen. Then if you come over to the other side, there's a few other collaborations and things like this. So yeah, All Goes South, which is a sour kiwi, part of the New Zealand Beer Collective, because Fierce, of course, like to bring New Zealand beers into Scotland, which we are not going to complain about at all. Another peach, a peach pale ale. Down in Splendour, a New Zealand Pilsner. Smashable Session Hazy Ale, the heavy bourbon as well, which I'm going to take away. A couple of beers here from an English brewery. I forget the name of these guys. So this brewery is... They are staggeringly good. I think the English guys have raved a little bit about these, but yeah, very nice. A little bit of Devil's Peak from South Africa, Attic Brewing Company, Boneface, these guys are from New Zealand, Play Brewing Company, Amity, who are from England as well. a little bit of Polly's from Wales, some North Brewing stuff, a little bit of Holy Goat, Twisted Sisters, hard seltzers, and then down here, of course, you've got some Fierce by Nature and a little bit of Holy Goat as well. So yeah, nice little beer fridge, and you can also see here is your Fierce Beer hoodie. They've got a rotating screen of different beers, and you can also buy these little canvas bags as well, which are pretty cool. So yeah, awesome stuff from Fierce Beer once again. Alright guys, well, time for our third tasting then here at Fierce Bar. So the third one we're going for is simply called the Fierce IPA. So yeah, this one is a West Coast IPA coming in at 5.5% ABV. And if you've watched the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I love my West Coast IPAs. So yeah, let's have a little look at this one then. So as you can see, this one's poured a lovely kind of rich golden amber colour. When this one poured, it had about a half finger of a frothy sort of ivory, slightly creamy coloured head there. That's faded away just to be a very kind of thin foamy layer. But yeah, it looks very, very nice this. It's crystal clear, as you can see. West Coast IPAs can often have a little bit of a natural haze to them. But yeah, this one is crystal clear. And again, remember, the colour of the beer depends on the type of malts that you use. So usually West Coast IPAs have some kind of brown sugary leaning malt to them. You know, like biscuit malt. In America they like to use Turo and Crystal and things like this. In the UK and Europe and stuff, they quite like to use Maris Otter and these kind of things. But it certainly looks the part of a West Coast IPA, this one. Beautiful looking beer. So on the aroma then, let's take a look at that. There's nothing surprising about the appearance of this beer. Let's have a look at the aroma. Smells pretty solid actually. Again, I think this is one of their kind of more core range beers that they're doing. But yeah, this one is pretty damn solid, and it's straight away you can see this is what you expect of a West Coast IPA. I don't think though it's got the dankness and bitterness and things that we were used to with the West Coast IPAs back in the day right enough, but that's another story. But on the aroma then, you can smell the backbone of this one. There is a wee bit of bread crust in there, a lovely kind of wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing for sure. I love that about the West Coast IPAs. But on top of that, you've got that nice big oily, caramelly sort of thing, and you've got some McVitie's digestive biscuity notes just mixed into that. That's my favourite thing about the West Coast IPA, it's just the malt base. Being Scottish, I always talk about the Scottish sweet tooth. We love big kind of brown sugary things here. And I think this is one of the reasons why the West Coast IPA has just stuck with me for so long. Love these beers. And this one really has that. The malty backbone in this is very, very nice. Yeah. On the that malty side of things, it's just absolutely lovely. It's got a wee touch of toastiness to it as well, which just gives it a wee bit more depth. There's maybe one or two little woody undertones in there, but the malt base in this one is just right up my street. Remember, beer's subjective. Different people say and like different things, but I like the malt base on this. That's pretty damn solid. Now, on the hoppy side of the aroma, definitely a wee bit of earthiness coming out of this one. I do get quite a little bit of floral character as well. I don't find this one particularly dank or piney. I actually find it more like a deep floral note. I wouldn't be surprised if this has got a little bit of Chinook in it. There's just something about this aroma is telling me Chinook, the earthiness, and then the deep floral note. I think there's also a bit of Cascade in this as well, incidentally, but we'll come to why in a minute. But yeah, there is a nice kind of deep floral aromaticity to this one, and there's quite like a wet, green grassy component to this one, like a wet, freshly cut grass component for me. So I do like how the aroma on this beer goes together actually. It works out very, very nicely on the green component as well. But yeah, on the fruity side of things then, I get the sort of little bit of grapefruit and that little bit of a juicy kind of figgy component that lie underneath, and that's, I do suspect quite heavily there's a good bit of Cascade in this. I think there's a bit of Cascade, Chinook, and maybe a wee bit of like Simcoe or Centennial or something like that, maybe both. I think this is properly old school, this one. The aroma that you get out of the fruity side of this beer is nice and oily. Grapefruit, the sort of figgy notes you get from Cascade as well. I do get a wee bit of a sort of mango-y, passion fruity sort of thing, and then there's a wee bit of a there's a wee bit of a sort of orange. I wouldn't say it's orangey. I think it's actually a little bit more like a big oily, citrusy kind of thing. I think it could be. I think maybe Centennial. There's just something. There's a sort of very slightly limey, lemony sort of thing in this. So it could be a little bit of Centennial or Equinaut or something that's in this as well. But yeah, it's quite well balanced between that grapefruity, figgy kind of thing and also that lemony, limey sort of note. But yeah, the aroma of this is lovely, big oily one. Let's taste this and see how we go. This is the Fierce IPA, 5.5%. Let's go for it. Yeah, that's pretty solid. Again, that's a pretty solid drinkable beer. So let's break it down. Backbone of the beer, bread crust, absolutely. And it does get a bit grainier the further you go into the aftertaste. There's one or two little woody undertones towards the front of that middle third of your palate. On top of that, you've got a nice kind of brown bready sort of thing. Absolutely, you get that nice kind of brown wholemealy bready sort of thing. So I do like how that comes out of this, and it does get drier and drier the further you go into the aftertaste actually. Back third of your palate you get the kind of slightly taller yeasty component in there, so that feels a bit more kind of dry and fluffy and stuff, but then as you move into the middle third of your palate there's some nice brown sugary notes in there, and it's quite an oily brown sugar. It comes across as quite caramelised, and you do get a wee bit of that drier McVitie's digestive sort of thing in there as well, so I do like how that goes together. So yeah, nice big dry oily kind of brown sugary note in there, just a bit toasted. That brown sugary note is nice, so you've got that big oily caramel in there. It's got the McVitie's digestive things just pass through it. You can feel the biscuity notes as you move further out towards the edges of that middle third of your palate. So yeah, oily caramelly notes in there, a bit of McVitie's digestive, and yet slightly sweeter in the dead centre of your palate. So I like how that goes together on this one. The malty side of this beer is nice. Back third of your palate, I do actually get quite a little bit of earthiness out of this one, and I think going by this, I think Fierce are maybe using some house yeasts, because you do get this. These beers have quite a prominent earthiness to them. The Hazy IPA had a fair wee bit of it as well, and the Pilsner had it too. So yeah, there is a wee bit of earthiness in this. As you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal, and as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, you can feel a deeper floral aromatic sort of thing, and just a little touch of spiciness on the front corner of the palate. But around the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and grassy, and it's like a fresh, wet cut grass sort of thing you get out of this one. Wet, fresh cut grass, I should say. Other way around. But yeah, that goes together really nicely. Front third of your palate, where you get the fruity side of things, nice oily character there. It's kind of as described in the aroma, a little bit of grapefruit at the back of the palate, and then underneath you can feel that sort of figgy note from you can feel that slightly figgy note from the Cascade, which I really like. But on top of that, you've got the on top of that, you do have there's a wee bit of a slightly mango-y, passion fruity sort of thing. Then as you come further forward into the front half of the front third of your palate, definitely a bit of an orangey, tangerine sort of thing. And I do want to say there's a wee bit of a kind of lemony lime. So this could actually be a little bit of Mosaic and Citra. It could be something like that. And then Cascade and Chinook underneath. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something really old school like that. Citra, Mosaic, Cascade, Chinook. I wouldn't be surprised if the hop bill is something like that. Too many hops out there these days, but this is a really nice old school West Coaster for sure. On the mouthfeel then, to round off, top end and mid-bodied this one, carbonation's very smooth, slick oily mouthfeel, IBUs, it's one of these lower IBU West Coast IPAs, I think we're talking about 50 IBUs, something like that at the most. 50 IBUs I think is a bit fair. Malt base is nice and smooth, bit bready, bit sweet, a little bit dry as well, and you've got those nice big oily fruit components. But yeah, this is a solid kind of core range West Coast IPA. Absolutely, I think this works out nicely. So yeah, the Fierce IPA, 5.5% ABV. Let's leave it at that for this one. Slide you just now. Alright guys, well, tasting number 4 then here at Fierce Bar, and you're going to end up with 6. I've decided we're going to do 6 because there's a really good selection of Fierce beers on the go today. So for this one, we're going to kind of round off what we've done with the IPA. So we've done a New England, we've done a West Coast, and now we're going to have a black IPA. So this one is called BIPA. It comes in at 5% ABV, and this was actually just released today, the 28th of October, in a can in the Aldi Scottish Beer Festival. So I saw it, I've got a can at home waiting to review, but I just thought, well, not often you get to drink a black IPA on tap these days, so why not? Yeah, but as you can see, as you would expect, this one's poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. When it poured, it had about a quarter to a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head. That's still there, but it is fading away to be a very thin foamy layer. But yeah, this one looks pretty much as you would expect of a black IPA. I don't think there's too much else we can really say about the appearance of this particular beer. It is what you would expect. We put the light through it, there's nothing really coming through that, so it's quite a hazy one. And I have found that these days you do get 2 different types of black IPAs. You get the more West Coasty ones, which are kind of caramelly and brown sugary, but you also seem to get ones these days that are a lot more kind of bready and oaty and things. So it's almost like a New England black IPA. So that's an interesting thing to watch out for. But let's look at the aroma of this one and see how we go. So my aroma's getting skewed a little bit because they've got one of these scent thing, you know, it goes off every half hour or something and puts scent out there, and they've just blown up. So all I can smell is air freshener at the moment. But let's see what we can do here. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. Yeah. So, backbone of this beer, absolutely, you get some of that roasty, toasty, really well-fired bread crust in there. I don't know if I would go quite as far as black malt in this, like, you know, straight up. Like, I think this might be a little bit carafa or something. There's just something about the aroma in here that tells me there might be some sort of carafa in there. Remember, carafa is a licensed malt from Weirmann in Bamberg in Franconia in Germany. It's a lovely, lovely malt, lots of different types of it, of course, but there's just something about the aroma of this beer is telling me that's what's in here. And I think it's the bread crust and the brown bread. So yeah, like I say, really toasty, well-fired bread crust in here. This like German rye bread sort of aroma as well. There's 1 or 2 little woody notes in there, but not a lot. You've got a lighter kind of wholemeal brown bread note as well, and for me there's like a really toasty, well-fired brown sugary component to this one. I think this is a more old school black IPA, if this makes sense. It's definitely got a little bit more of that kind of roasty, toasty and oily, caramelly component to it. So the malt base on this beer is absolutely lovely. I think this is very, very nice. I do miss black IPAs. And in that Aldi Beer Festival actually there was 2 of them. There's one from Stewart Brewing as well. And over the last year or 2, it's been nice to see that the black IPA has been getting a little bit more attention actually. Quite a few Swedish breweries have been doing black IPAs. The malty side of this beer is very, very nice. Proper old school black IPA for sure. But on the hoppy side of things, there's a little bit of earthiness in there. You get a nice bright floral aromaticity out of the beer as well. That's very, you know, it's quite smooth. The green component of this beer is very smooth, I would say that. You've got some nice grassy components in there as well. A little bit of a wet, fresh cut grass. But yeah, earthy, floral, and a nice kind of grassy quality as well. So I like how this one goes together. The bready base of this beer kind of comes through underneath the fruity side of it too. On the fruity side of things, you get a little bit of raisin, you do get a bit of a nice juicy plum underneath, and there's also a wee bit of a figgy aroma as well. But yeah, for me, yeah, raisins, figs, plum, these kind of things. A very sharp red fruity note you get out of this. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a Chinook Cascade sort of thing again. It's a very good thing to use with black IPAs, and Simcoe works very well with black IPAs too. But the aroma, this is very nice, very old school. So let's have a look at this one and see how we go. This is the BEEPA, B-E-E-P-A, 5% black IPA. One of Fierce Beer's own beers again. Let's go, sláinte. Now, for me, black IPAs are not sessionable beers. For me, this is black IPAs for me are tasters. I really enjoy these beers as tasters. So you have with this one, it's odd enough. What I was going for here is that it actually comes across as quite accessible and light and drinkable one. So it's got a lot of the same vibes that we had from the New England and the West Coast. And like I said, Fierce seem to be upping their sessionable game, but for me, a black IPA is not a session beer. These are taster beers, absolutely. But this is nice. I'm going to say this is solid, and it's quite roasty and toasty as well. Let's break this flavour down for you. So, on the middle of your palate with this one, it's pretty much saturated with this really toasty, well-fired, bread crusty sort of thing. On top of that, there's a lovely brown bready component to it, and it is like a German rye bread, but the roasty, toasty, fired backbone of this really is prominent. That really is prominent. In the middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a toasty, well-fired brown sugar, and it's a wee bit oily and caramelly in the middle of your palate, but it's not actually that sweet. You get more of the breadiness in there, and it is more of a kind of bready leaning black IPA, which I'm a bit surprised about. The yeasty components on the back third of the palate are there, but they're not too prominent. There's maybe one or two little woody undertones in there as well. But yeah, this is a big brown bready and toasty, well-fired black IPA. I do like how this goes together in that sense. So yeah, it has got a bit of the old school West Coast black IPA, but the breadiness is a little bit more like the New England side of things, which is interesting. So yeah, let's look at the hoppy side. So yeah, hoppy side of the beer, back corners of the palate, definitely a nice little bit of big earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal, and then as you push towards the front corners of the palate, you definitely get a little bit of that deeper kind of pine resiny sort of thing, and also some spicy floral aromaticity. Wouldn't be surprised if it's a bit of Chinook and Columbus in this one. I think there is a little bit of that in here, absolutely. Round the front curve of your palate, definitely some lighter grassiness, a little bit of kind of citrusy zest in there as well, but not too much. Then I don't think there's too much else to say about the green component of the beer. On the fruity side of it, it's quite the fruit's actually a little bit nondescript, to be honest with you. It's not as big and fruity as the aroma would have you believe. So yeah, there's a wee bit of raisin in there, but it's actually like a very juicy, figgy character that you get out of this one. So it's quite juicy and figgy on the back half of that front third of your palate, and as you come further forward, it's a little bit more sort of black curranty. It's like a soft black currant. So the fruits in this one are very, very different from what you pick up in the aroma. So I find that quite unusual actually. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer is kind of interesting in that sense. So soft and juicy, a little bit of figgy character, a little bit of a kind of black curranty sort of thing. Don't even really get any oily blackberry or whatever. Just a wee touch of raisin, black currant, black currant, and a wee bit of fig. That's interesting. It's quite a straightforward. Hear that in that sense. To round off with the mouthfeel then. Mid-bodied, smooth carbonation, quite smooth but at the same time quite slick. It's almost got a more New Englandy black IPA kind of vibe to it. So yeah, a wee bit of that. The bitterness in this one is a wee bit higher. I would say this is maybe about 70 IBUs, 70 maybe 80 IBUs. You're getting a bit of bitterness from the malt base and the hops, of course. Malt base is mainly smooth and a little bit dry, and a wee bit of a slightly juicy fruity character. So this is an interesting one. I'm going to enjoy trying this in the can again a bit later. But yeah, Then we can round off there. The BPAT 5% from Fierce Beer, Black IPA. Let's leave it at that for number 4. On to number 5. So yeah, you can see before we film these last two tastings, this sort of vibe is quieting down and the lights have gone a little bit dimmer and things like that. It's quite nice, you know, really relaxed, enjoying it. And you can see outside the light level is dropping. There we go. But awesome times at Fierce Bar, for sure. Alright guys, tasting number 5 at Fierce Bar then. So for this one we have a beer that is something of a Fierce Beer classic. So this guy is the Cafe Racer. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, a porter with Sumatran coffee and Madagascan vanilla. It is an awesome beer, not had it in a very, very long time, but when I saw it on tap I was like, we need to do a tasting of that one, absolutely. So yeah, this looks very nice and it's kind of as you would expect. So when this beer poured, again it was about a quarter or 1/3 finger of frothy, I would say medium tan head on this one. The colour of the beer is obviously dark ebony rosewood, and this is what you would expect from a porter. You wouldn't expect anything else. But yeah, nothing really surprising about the appearance of this beer when you consider what style it is and what it is. So yeah, let's look at the aroma and see how we go. Ooh. It's such a nostalgia trip, that. Such a nostalgia trip, but beautiful smelling beer. So straight away with this one, you smell it, you get a few things. Backbone of the beer, you get a bit of bread crust, toasty bread crust, brown bread in there, and infused into all of that, you've got the coffee beans. Now, as I've explained in various sit-down reviews and things that I do, the coffee bean is one of my favourite adjuncts that you can put into craft beer. So when it comes to coffee beans, there's many different things that can affect the flavour. You know, the soil composition, the water composition, and of course that's dependent on geography. And then what they call the mazel, the metres above sea level. Apparently the altitude at which coffee is grown can seriously affect the flavour that you'll get out of it. So yeah, coffee beans, my favourite thing. So Sumatran coffee, obviously Sumatra is one of the areas of Indonesia. And when it comes to this one, it's a really nice coffee. It's got like quite a smooth roast to it. It's got a good bit of aromaticity, I would say. And I get, it's got a mix of a kind of citrusy and red fruity component as well. And that's just the coffee bean. So yeah, lovely aromatic coffee to this one, smooth roast, citrusy, and slightly kind of, you know, blackberry-like as well. So yeah, that's interesting. That's just the coffee bean. Underneath that though, you definitely get little hints of chocolate. I mean, there's maybe a sort of 80-90% cocoa chocolate in there, but quite smooth again. Definitely some nice milky chocolate notes as well because of the vanilla, and the vanilla of course is really obvious. Madagascan vanilla, everyone should know that. Beautiful big note in there. There's maybe a wee hint of brown sugar in this beer as well. I do get a lovely kind of sweet caramelly note out of this one, but it's got a slightly toasty edge to it, and when it's a coffee vanilla porter, that absolutely makes sense. This beer's won a lot of awards. And I would say, you know, if it comes to two classic dark beers in Scotland, two that would immediately spring to mind would be the Fierce Cafe Racer and also the Fallon Choo Choo. You know, these are two dark beers in Scotland that you must try. So as I say, when it was on tap, I thought, why not? Hoppy side of this beer then. It's got a bit of a smooth earthiness to it. You do get little hints of floral notes in there, but not a lot. And there is a wee bit of grassiness. I would say there is a little bit of a grassy, very slightly zesty sort of thing out of this one, which is quite interesting. But as I say, the coffee in this beer is so aromatic. The hops obviously take a back seat because it is a porter. But yeah, the aroma out of this is absolutely lovely. On the fruity side of things, wee bit of a figgy note to it, maybe a teeny bit of a raisiny sharpness, and you've also got a lovely sort of black curranty note to this one, a lovely juicy kind of black curranty note. But yeah, the aroma of this beer is absolutely lovely. I think this goes together really well. It's just such, you know, for me it's such a nostalgia trip to come back to this beer. As I said when I had the Choo Choo at camper van brewing in Edinburgh that time a few weeks back. But yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we go. This is the Cafe Racer 6.5% fierce beer. Sláinte.
Honestly, it's a good sugar. We honestly 2 hours here.
Yeah. Such a solid beer. Such a solid beer. Now, when it comes to fierce, obviously this isn't one of the crazier beers you're going to get. Fierce really shine when it comes to the big, massive imperial stouts. The barrel aged things that they do are just awesome. But it's a classic beer. This Fierce have always been really good at dark beers. This is the dark beer that they do. I think this is the one that you have to try. But this is good. This and Very Big Moose, two classic fierce beers. Yeah, beautiful stuff. So let's break this down for you. Straight across the middle of your palate, lovely roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. Layer of kind of brown bread on top of that. One or two woody components towards the front of that middle third of your palate. Then you've got the coffee beans sitting there. The coffee beans kind of sit on that, from the midpoint of your tongue towards the back of your palate. So yeah, you've got a lovely coffee bean component to this one, which I think goes together very, very well. Yeah, it works really nicely. Yeah, the coffee bean and the flavour, the roastiness is a bit more prominent. You do still get the aromaticity in there, but it's a little bit more muted than in the aroma, and you do certainly get those red fruity components as well. So yeah, the coffee bean in this is absolutely lovely. In the middle of your palate, you can feel a sort of layer of really toasty brown sugar, and there's definitely a little bit of a kind of cocoa nib sort of dryness in the middle of your palate too, which is interesting. So some nice, cocoa nib dryness in there. As I say, a bit of sweet caramel and a lot of toasty brown sugar as well. It's a very smooth but still quite dry and bready porter, this one actually for me. So that's something that I don't remember. It might just be due to the kind of keg conditioning, if you like, but this beer feels a little bit different. But yeah, the notes out of this are nice. It's got a really good balance between the kind of chocolatey notes, the brown sugar, and the coffee. The vanilla, I think, takes a little bit more time to come out. The vanilla, it more comes out on the aftertaste, and you can feel that towards the front of that middle third of your palate. But yeah, beautiful beer. On the hoppy side of things, back corners of the palate, there's a nice little bit of, there's a little bit of an earthiness in there. As you come further forward, it sort of mellows out and smoothens out. As you reach the front corners of the palate, it's a little touch floral. Then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a wee bit more floral. It's a wee bit more sort of lighter and grassy, I would say, actually. So yeah, I like that. But let's focus on the front third of your palate too. So on the fruity side, when you take it in, it's a little bit more, you do get a little bit of raisiny sharpness out of it, but quite quickly that evolves to be more kind of black curranty, and it evolves to be a little bit more sort of black curranty and kind of figgy, I would say. But then on the front tip of the tongue, you start to get a little bit more of an oily blackberry sort of vibe out of the beer, which I really quite like. So yeah, the way it goes together is... the way that it goes together, this is very, very nice. Such a nostalgia trip to come back to this beer, as I said, but beautifully done as always. Mouthfeel wise, yeah, it's light-bodied. Mid-bodied, smooth carbonation, quite slick actually. In terms of IBUs, I think this has got to be about 50 or 60, definitely 50 or 60, and a lot of that's from the malt base, but the hops are contributing. Malt base, as we said, is very, very smooth. The coffee bean is lovely in this, quite aromatic, and the aromaticity really resonates into the aftertaste, and the fruity notes out of this beer are quite soft actually. So yeah, this is a lovely, lovely beer, and like I said, very, very nice to come back to this one after such a long time. So let's leave it at that for tasting number 5. This was the Cafe Racer 6.5% porter, one of Fierce Beer's classic beers in my mind. Let's go on to the next one. Sláinte, cheers. Alright guys, well, sixth and final tasting then here at Fierce Bar in Aberdeen. So the last beer that we're going for is one of my favourite styles of beer. I saw it on tap and I thought, you know, we have to have one of these. So this one is the Heavy on the Bourbon, a bourbon barrel aged, wee heavy Scotch ale, whatever you want to call it, 9.5% ABV. I've never tried this beer before as far as I remember, but yeah, I think this should be something pretty special. I'm going to get a can of this as well to take away and do a sit down review of, so you can enjoy that at some point in the future. But yeah, anyway, as you can see, if I hold this beer up to the light, it's got a little bit of it's a very sort of dark rosewoody colour, this one. I'm not sure how well it's going to show up on the camera because it's starting to get dark outside because we're sitting about 6 o'clock just now. But yeah, this one's got a lovely dark sort of ebony kind of rosewoody colour to it. Not quite as dark as the Bipa or the Cafe Race that we've had in the last tastings, but still. When it poured, it had about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say ivory coloured head. It had that, but that's just fading away to be a very kind of thin foamy layer on the top and a nice foamy ring around the edge of the glass actually. But when it's a 9.5% bourbon barrel aged Scotch ale, you kind of expect that, to be honest. You're not expecting the head to stick around all that long. But appearance wise, it's pretty much what you would expect. Now, when it comes to Scotch ales and wee heavies, there is the shilling system, of course. So the shilling refers to the tax that used to be on these beers in Scotland. You get the 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 and 90 shilling. As you go up the scale, the malt content increases, the ABV increases, and thus the tax on the beer increases as well. From some breweries you can also get 160 shillings. Tracker House Brewery would be one to look into for that. But yeah, the Scotch ale, lovely big brown sugary bready beers. The Americans are the ones who tend to call them the wee heavies, if I remember correctly. But yeah, beautiful beers. I love trying a Scotch ale. So to get to do a Scotch ale review in Aberdeen in one of my out and about videos is pretty special for me. So let's look at the aroma of this one then, the Heavy on the Bourbon. Let's go for it. Aroma of this beer. It's just beautiful. So the backbone of this one, you can smell the American bourbon whiskey right away. You get a lot of oak out of this, you get that little bit of vanilla sort of thing, and those sweet brown sugary elements from the bourbon. As I've explained in quite a few kind of sit-down reviews, for me, when it comes to Scotch whisky is a lot grainier, a lot spicier almost, and it's just got a little bit more kind of bite to it in a sense, whereas the American bourbons tend to be very smooth and very kind of sweet, and that's what you get out of this beer. You do get that smoothness and sweetness. So you can smell that oaky backbone, the vanilla in there. You can smell the bourbon itself actually, and it's almost got a little bit of a kind of leathery vibe to it as well. But yeah, on top of that, some lovely big caramelly, I don't know if I go as far as treacle, but there's quite a lot of brown sugar in this beer, absolutely. Yeah, big caramelly, treacly brown sugars in this one. You can smell the bourbon liquid in behind it too. Yeah, the aroma of that goes out, it's really interesting. There's actually, it really smells quite spirity, which is interesting. You get a lot of liquor, as the Americans would call it, spirit out of this beer. So yeah, big brown sugars in there, sweet caramel, the bourbon of course coming out, leathery notes, a few bits of nutty character as well, which is interesting. But the aroma of this beer is pretty intense, it's kind of crazy. Beautiful stuff though, so I'm going to say thumbs up to Fierce Beer on this one. On the hoppy side of things, not a lot to report. Little small bit of earthiness, wee bit of grassiness, but when this is a bourbon barrel aged Scotch ale, you're not expecting too much. The Scotch ales usually have a little bit of grassiness and floral character and wee touch of earthiness, but when this is bourbon barrel aged, most of your hop character is going to drop out. On the fruity side of things though, there's a lot of I do get a lot of kind of sultana or raisiny type notes out of this, some prunes, a few cakey elements to the beer as well actually, and then one or two raisiny, figgy notes as well. So the aroma of this is something else, it's pretty crazy. I'm noticing the camera's going in and out, I think it's just because of the light levels. But yeah, I think this is going to be pretty special. But take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma of this, because this is pretty special. But yeah, this one is the heavy on the bourbon, a 9% bourbon barrel-aged Scotch ale, wee heavy, whatever you want to call it, from Fierce Beer. Let's have a taste of this. Slàinte, Skull, been awesome to film these reviews for you at Fierce Bar. Cheers. It's actually, I find this one really fruity actually. I do wonder, maybe is there a wee touch of oxidation to this? Not 100% sure. But yeah, this is a big brown sugary beer, absolutely. But you get the woodiness and the bourbon out of it really, really nicely. Yeah. This is nice. It is nice, just not quite what I expected. I expected it to be a little bit thicker and oilier and stuff. But the flavour of this does come in really, really nicely. So let's break this down for you. Middle of your palate then, you can feel that nice, smooth, but slightly dry, oaky wood character. You feel that go right across the middle and back third of your palate. On top of that, you get some kind of leathery flavours. Towards the front of that middle third of your palate, definitely some nutty notes, a few vanilla things in there, and further back you get some of these kind of leathery qualities as well. But in the middle third of your palate, there's definitely the kind of bourbon sugars in there. You can feel that big brown sugary element coming out of it. It's slightly toasty actually, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, some nice big bourbon, brown sugary whiskey notes out of the beer. Absolutely. And yeah, the further into the aftertaste you go, you get more woods, you get more of that dry, oaky, woody sort of thing. You get the vanilla. It's quite a quirky beer, this one. It's not what I expected at all actually, but I do wonder, maybe my palate was a bit saturated by the Cafe Racer. So that's interesting. So let me just take a wee sip of water and see. Yeah, let's see. There we go, yeah. A lot more brown sugar now. I think I maybe just had a wee bit of saturation because of the Cafe Racer, but yeah, the brown sugar's come out a lot more now just with a wee rinse of water, absolutely. So you can feel that big caramelised, treacly molasses sort of thing coming out of the beer. Absolutely. Towards the back of the palate, of course, you do get a wee bit of the yeasty, bready sort of thing, but this beer really isn't bready. It's a big oily, dry, woody, brown sugary sort of thing. But yeah, this is very nice on the malt base, and that's what you'd expect. Let's look at the kind of hoppy and fruity side of the beer then. So, back corners of the palate, lovely little bit of earthiness there. As you come further forward, it smoothens out. It's a little bit herbal, and as you reach the front corners of the palate, just a little tiny touch of floral aromaticity. And around the front curve of the palate, you get the remnants of a slightly grassy component to the beer. But of course, since this is bourbon barrel-aged, the hoppy notes have dropped right out of it. But front third of your palate, you can feel those big oily, fruity characters. Behind that though, there is an element of cakiness to this. It's like a fruit roll, fruit loaf kind of thing. So I'm getting quite a bit of that vibe out of this beer for sure. But the fruity side of the beer is really nice too. When you take it in, definitely a little bit of raisin in there for sure. Yeah, sharp raisin in there, some nice sultana. Yeah, some nice sort of sultana dried white bean grapes in there underneath. As you move further forward, you do get a little slightly touch of berry character out of this, and as you reach the front tip of the palate, a little bit of a figgy blackberry type note out of this one. But yeah, figgy blackberry, that definitely works. And then I think on top of that, maybe there is just a wee bit of an oily, peary character in there, which is interesting. So there's quite a bit of a cakey, dried, fruity vibe on the front third of your palate. So I think other than that, there's not too much to say about the flavour of this one. It's really complex. This is a sort of night-ending beer, if you like, and that's why I went for it. I think I would probably be able to review this one a bit better with a a clean palate, so I'm glad I'm buying a can of this. But it's a very, very nice beer and really interesting for sure. But let's round off this little tasting then with the mouthfeel. So mouthfeel wise, I would say bottom end the full bodied, top end the mid bodied. I always find that barrel aging takes the mouthfeel of the beer down a little bit. And this one for a for a Scotch ale, it feels just a little touch thin in my mind. But carbonated is smooth, it's got a wee bit of slickness to it. In terms of bitterness, I think it's quite low. This maybe 30 IBUs at the most. Malty character, big, smooth, lots of brown sugar, a little bit of dryness to it as well from the woody, barrel-aged side of things, and then a wee bit of a juicy, fruity character, but quite a dried fruity note as well. So this is a really interesting one. I'm glad I got to try this on tap. But this is heavy on the bourbon, 9.5%, wee heavy Scotch ale, bourbon barrel aged from Fierce Beer, and that rounds off our tasting. So we'll go outside, I'll give you my final thoughts, and I'll see you in just a second. Slange you just now. Alright guys, so just finished up here at Fierce Bar on Exchequer Road in Aberdeen. So I had a really nice evening here. I ended up with 6 1/3 pints, various different beers, and I bought a bottle of one of their sour beers and a can of one of their big bourbon barrel aged things to take away with me, and that only came to £28, so that's probably about like 32 euros, 320 Swedish kroner, maybe about 38 American dollars, something like that. So that was pretty awesome actually. We got 6 really good beer tastings and we got to try a variety of different styles. They didn't have one of the sours on tap, unfortunately. That's the only other thing I would have liked to have done, other than maybe one of the Imperial Stouts. But yeah, I had a really good time here. Massive shout out to Nathan, who is the bar manager. He was awesome, his service was great. I was really impressed with that. But if you get the chance to come and visit Fierce Bar in Aberdeen, this is their hometown. They've always got a good selection of their beers on. It's definitely worth it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this out and about video. I'm going to go and meet my friends now. But yeah, come and check out Fierce Bar here in Aberdeen, their hometown. They're based up in Dice, just next to the airport. An awesome brewery, sour beers and big bourbon barrel aged things, Imperial Stouts, Scotch ales and stuff are their speciality, but they're also very good these days when it comes to the more sessionable things as well. We got a good idea of what their IPAs are all tasting. Thanks for watching. Check out all my social media, check out Fierce Beer, and I'll catch you guys on the next out and about video. Slange you just now. Cheers.